You've seen it a million times in movies, right? That dramatic, over-the-top moment, usually played for laughs. But what if I told you that behind that old cliché, there's some really fascinating and surprisingly serious psychology going on? Let's get into the real story behind faking it.
Which of course brings us to the big question. Do people actually do this in real life? And if they do, what are the real reasons driving it?
Well, the short answer, according to study after study, is a big yes. But honestly, the interesting part isn't the what, it's the why. Because this usually isn't about simple deception. The real motivations are way more complex, and they're rooted deep in our feelings, and most importantly, in how we communicate, or, how we sometimes fail to.
Okay, so before we dive into the real psychology, let's just take a second to acknowledge where most of us start with this topic, which is, of course, that common pop culture cliché.
But now, let's move past the stereotype and get to the heart of the matter. Research points to 5 core psychological motivations for why this happens. So let's break them down.
So here are the 5 big ones that researchers keep seeing. First, there's the desire to protect a partner's feelings, to avoid that awkwardness. Then there's the more practical side, like simply wanting to end an encounter. Number 3 is huge, performance pressure, thanks to what we see in media. Then, of course, there's the simple reality that it can be difficult to reach orgasm. And finally, for some, it just becomes a learned habit. As you can see, it's a pretty complex mix of emotional, practical, and psychological stuff.
Okay, so we've covered the why, that whole mix of reasons. But if you look a little closer, all 5 of these things point to a single underlying issue. And I'm willing to bet it's probably not what you think it is.
And this really gets to the heart of it. The common assumption, the thing we all think, is that this is an act of deception, a lie. But the psychology behind it suggests something much, much deeper. It's not about the lie, it's about a gap in communication.
Let's just sit with that for a second. Faking orgasms is rarely about manipulation, it's often about communication gaps. This one idea completely reframes the entire behavior, doesn't it? It moves it out of the world of deceit and into the world of connection, or maybe a lack of connection.
So if the real issue is a communication breakdown, what do these so-called gaps actually look like? And more to the point, what's the solution?
The research here is really clear. When partners can talk openly and honestly about what feels good, about their expectations, about what makes them feel comfortable, the entire dynamic just shifts. People report feeling way less of that performance pressure we talked about. And, not surprisingly, this leads to more genuinely satisfying experiences for everyone. The perceived need to fake it just starts to dissolve.
All right, so this brings us to the final and maybe most important takeaway from all of this. It's really about shifting our focus away from the act itself and onto the environment where it happens.
And here it is, the simplest way to put it. People fake it less when they feel safe being honest. It's not about technique, it's not about stamina, it's about psychological safety. It's about having the ability to say, hey, this isn't really working for me right now, without being afraid of a negative reaction. That's the real game changer.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. All the pressure, the performance, the faking, it's all focused on a single outcome. But what if we change the goal entirely? What if the goal wasn't the climax, but the conversation? That shift in perspective, well, that might just change everything.